Hello and welcome to the John Ark Show. On today's episode, we're going to interview actor, director, producer, and author Patrick Kilpatrick. Now, Patrick has appeared in over 180 major motion pictures. Great films, really great films like Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Minority Report with Tom Cruise, Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis, The Presidio with Sean Connery, and Under Siege 2 with Steven Seagal. He's also got an interesting book out called Dying for a Living, Sins and Confessions of a Hollywood Villain and Libertine Patriot, Volume 1. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, and follow us. Also, I'd like to tell you about a service called HollywoodIsCalling.com. It allows you to purchase live phone calls with more than 100 celebrities. There are 15-second calls for $19.95 and 30-second calls for $29.95. So give it a try. It's a great gift for yourself or someone you may want to buy it for. HollywoodIsCalling.com. Now, without any further ado, let's talk to Patrick. Hi, Patrick, and welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm just fine, thank you.
One of the reasons that we wanted to interview you is that you've managed to achieve success in a number of careers as an actor, as an author, writer, producer, and teacher. Now, you've appeared in more than 180 movies, and that's really impressive. You know, was it your strong acting ability, or was it your work ethic that got you to that level of success?
That's an interesting question. No, it's because I was limited in talent as an actor. No, the truth is, I think it was a combination of both. If I can say that without arrogance, I work really, really diligently to. The curriculum that I teach to other actors is called Deliver the Goods. So you really have to do what you need to do to deliver the goods. And sometimes that would mean driving a long way the night before and sleeping on a flatbed at the set so you'd be fresh the next day to shoot, or whatever I need to do to go through to deliver the goods and get a performance as well as I can deliver is what I go through. Very professionally driven.
I hear that a lot. I remember seeing Al Pacino talking about how he used to sleep on the floor of the actor's studio because he was so broke. So
yeah,
it's a common story. So you're starting your career out, and at some point you get your first big break, the break that changed everything. What was that like?
Well, I really don't even think about it that way. I mean, there are different breaks, like a first studio movie or my first break, I think, was actually doing a play at a theater that's very well known in New York called Second Stage, the Second Stage. And it's a play that's Meryl Streep and a bunch of other really high-profile people are on the board. And it's larger than, say, off-Broadway. It's just beneath Broadway in scope. Really extraordinary people. David Mamet plays, and William Hurt and Sean Penn and everybody perform there. And it's the kind of theater where if you perform there, everybody in the New York business attends. You know, all the agents, the managers, casting people, they all come to see the plays there. So I did a play there, and I was paid $50 a week because at the time I wasn't in the theatrical union, Actors Equity. So, and I just, everything took off from there. I got a top agent. Within a week of finishing that play, I was in a film directed by Nicholas Roeg, who's a masterful director that many of your audience may not know, but he directed such things as The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie. So literally, it just took off from there. And getting that first agent out of that play was a huge break. Of course, I'd run my own theater company before that, And I really don't think in terms of breaks. I really think in terms of bricks in the wall, if you will. You know, it's a big deal to do your first studio movie, Remo Williams, when that happened. But the work always continues, and you're always just moving on to the next job. And sometimes you'll get what appears to be a big break, like a movie with Spielberg, and then you won't work for a year. So I'm always working because I'm writing and I'm doing something else. But for me, it's been more of a volume trajectory, if you would.
Was Remo Williams your first big budget movie, a movie that had some weight?
Yeah, that was the first studio film I did. I mean, I was overjoyed to be in it. And I met Guy Hamilton, who's a great British director who directed The Battle of Britain and some of the early Bond films, Goldfinger and Dr. No. And, you know, I met and chatted with him, and he hired me. And so I was off and running on about 6 months of a studio film.
You've played a lot of villains in a lot of movies. Do you think playing villains and gangsters adds more zeros to your paycheck than playing nice guys?
Then playing what guys?
Than playing nice guys?
I think the truth is playing villains is a really rich acting turf, and there's some advantage to it. They can't really cut you out of the movie because all the action turns on the action of the antagonist. I think generally the front guy is your marquee name who's brought the financing to the movie, so they're going to be paid more than you are. I've done very well, but there's no question, even though you're acting against Tom Cruise and Chow Yun-fat in Replacement Killers or Bruce Willis in Last Man Standing, those are the guys who brought the financing to the movie. And actually, those are the guys who the most responsibility for the success of the movie falls upon. You can actually be an antagonist or a character actor in a lot of movies that might not be successful, and nobody's going to think anything of it for you. You're just an actor in that particular project. But if a movie fails, they're going to blame the front guy. So I guess there's a certain justice to them getting more money. Sometimes it does get on you. I'd be lying if I said that it doesn't, because of the imbalance of the paycheck sometimes. I actually publicly many years ago said any salary I got over $1 million, I would share a goodly portion of it with the cast and the crew, because it's almost like the quarterback is getting $1 zillion, but his front line isn't being as paid as well as they might. And I don't think that's, if you're a good leader, you're actually functioning that way. But that's the nature of the business. Bruce Willis said once, you get what you can get. So that's a whole science and an art to get your quote up and get the amount of money that you want to get for a particular part.
So at some point, I'm assuming you received your first serious life-changing paycheck. Do you remember what you did with that money?
Well, for me, I'm a little different. I had been a high-paid advertising writer and a journalist for a long time, for almost 10, 13 years prior to being an actor. So I was kind of used to being paid well. I was a staff person for life and time, and so I was paid pretty well for that. So probably what I did with the first check, I have no idea. I'm a big organic food devotee. So when I was 9 years old, my father said, you better earn a lot of money because you've got expensive tastes. And I was just a child, and I've kind of kept to that. I always eat really well. The only things an actor needs, really, is a great wardrobe. And I maintain that because often I'll buy things for a low-budget film or a smaller budget film. I use my own wardrobe because it's usually better than their budget can afford. And you need to take care of your body and your spirit. And so I've always done that.
So you did a groundbreaking movie called Minority Report with Tom Cruise,
Yeah.
and it was really spectacular. Now, I recently watched it again, and I loved how brilliant the jetpack fight scene was, where you and Tom flew around in the sky and you fought
Uh,
each other. There were some really impressive scenes. Can you tell us what that was like to film?
well, that was a magical experience on a lot of levels. First of all, I didn't even have to audition or meet Steven Spielberg to get hired. He saw me in a show that James Cameron was in charge of called Dark Angel, and I was hired on the spot. So that's, I call it in my book, Dying for Living, my memoir. I call it a true golden Hollywood moment. And I've had a couple of those. I mean, there's no question that Steven Spielberg calling your agent and hiring you for 4 months, sight unseen in a sense, not even having to meet him, is a unique experience. Working with him, when I have immense respect for him, his filmography is staggering if you really look at it, you know, from Schindler's List to Close Encounters. I mean, the diversity of his work is truly astounding. He's notable for another couple of reasons, because he rarely spends over $100 million on a movie, usually 70, 80, 90, yet he gets the results that he does. He's probably the most frugal big budget director I've ever run into. So that's remarkable. And then working with Tom's an amazing action performer, because like me, he'll risk life and limb to get a good product. He's taken it to extremes that I was never required to, although I did some dangerous stunts, because you're always looking for the best shot you can get. So Minority Report was extraordinary on a lot of levels. For one thing, they invent equipment. Steven often invents equipment just to do the kind of shooting they do. The sequence you're talking about, the stunt stuff, nothing new for me, because I've done about 90% of my own stunts. I had a wonderful stunt double for some truly life-threatening things, a guy named Dave Rowden, and a couple of other guys in my career who've done stuff for me. But largely, I ended up doing most of it myself. In that particular case, they had an apparatus. People don't realize, but Minority Report, they literally took over every studio in town. There was stuff going on at Fox. There was stuff going on at Universal and Warner Brothers. So over at Universal, they built an apparatus that was the highest apparatus that had ever been built at that time. And up until that moment, the ones that they had built for Rolling Stone concerts were the highest apparatus. And they built this apparatus for us to fly around on wires. And of course, we did it ourselves, mostly. Eventually, somebody over the studio said, hey, wait a second, we've got our $60 million guy 125 feet up in the air going around at 35 miles an hour. We need to put a stop to this. So they brought Tom and I down, and a stunt guy came in for some portions of this stuff. But mostly we did it ourselves. By the way, that won Stunt of the Year award, which I was always very proud of to do that. So we won Stunt of the Year award, but what's really funny was neither stunt. I guess you'd have to call Tom a stunt man at this juncture. He and I certainly was. I never got paid extra for it, though.
So did you hear the other day, a guy in a jetpack flew close to an airliner that was landing at LAX? And I thought, well, this is what our world is coming to. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't. I hear about the drones coming really close, but jetpacks are totally cool. I've always wanted one.
Yeah. So you did a great action movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Caan called Eraser.
Yeah.
Really groundbreaking in several ways. What's interesting is that the high-tech weaponry in that movie was considered futuristic at the time because you could see through walls. Now, The government actually uses technology like that on a regular basis. When you guys are producing movies, uh, is there a lot of pressure to always come up with something new? I know in the Bond movies, they're always coming up with new gadgetry. Do you guys feel that same pressure to always introduce new technology or gadgetry to your audience?
I don't think of it as pressure. I think of that as being one of the glories of the work we do. Um, I talk about it in my book that you sometimes inexplicably run into resistance to creating some new things, which is always, I've found, surprising in my case. I did a Western with Tom Selleck, and we'll reserve that for the memoir. And I did a movie with Steven Seagal called Under Siege 2. And I'm always looking for a place, how do we take the artistic flag and put it higher? But some people don't want to do that. They're either, and I think that's a legitimate concern. They're worried about the safety of it, but I think you can get over that by calculation. So yeah, the best action movies are always taking it higher. Is there a pressure? No, that's the great, you're either in this business to create something new and to elevate the artistic flag up the mountain, then I don't think you should be in the business.
So you did another great gangster movie with Bruce Willis called The Last Man Standing. And I think that's one of Bruce's most underappreciated movies. What was that movie like to work on?
Well, Walter Hill is a really interesting character. I went in and I auditioned for the part, and it went very well. I could tell it went very well. But when I walked out, I wanted a bigger part. So I said, can I audition for this other part? And he said, well, there's a man who likes to play poker. So I was like, I had won the bet, but I was going all in for something higher. It turned out that was the part they had already given to Christopher Walken, which was another reason why the movie was fascinating for me, because Chris is an extraordinary performer, and he has a unique way. He had a unique way of working on that film. I suspect that he tries to come up with new, unique ways of working on every movie that he's on. But he basically would improv every line. And if his line was, hey, there's Patrick Kilpatrick, he would say, hey, there's that boogaloo, boo-boo-boo, boo-boo, handsome devil, Patrick Kilpatrick. And then he would go, hey, there's that donkey flying in the air, Patrick Kilpatrick. And he would say like 37 different lines. So the editor would be left, and all of them were fabulous, and all of them were interesting. So that was a great thing to work on. Bruce and I had a lot in common because at the time I had some land in Telluride, Colorado, and he had some land in Sun Valley, Idaho. So we had a lot to talk about. Also, his Demi's, he was married to Demi Moore at the time, her makeup artist, who famously did all the nude things when she was pregnant on Vanity Fair, that Joanne Gare, who was also Madonna's makeup artist, she was a close friend of my then wife and myself at the time. And we had jointly bought some land in Telluride, Colorado. So we had that to talk about. I really enjoyed working with Bruce. Bruce, you know, comes from a stage background, which is similar to my own. And I had come off of this run with athletes, sort of like Jean-Claude and Steven Seagal and Arnold to some extent, all great iconic people. But I was kind of happy to be back with an actor, just a pure actor. And that's what Bruce was and is, you know.
So let's talk about the movie business today. When it comes to content production and acquisition, Netflix is beating a lot of its competitors when bidding on projects. I heard that Netflix beat out HBO for the latest Chris Rock comedy special when they paid him $40 million. How has Netflix affected the movie business for you and some of your colleagues?
Well, I think it's a lifesaver because I don't know if you remember, not so long ago, reality shows had literally killed scripted television shows. There was about a decade where you didn't see it coming back. I mean, yeah, you had some network shows, but the vast majority of the numbers had gone way, way down. And then all of a sudden you have these streaming shows, and you have HBO and Showtime and all of these things coming on, and they were the saving grace age of filmmaking and television, like when Lucille Ball was there, or in the 70s of films with Warren Beatty's stuff and Bonnie and Clyde and things. Great periods, great revolutionary periods in cinema and content. But really now, because of Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, the streaming services, who have the money and to write the checks for content, and this insatiable appetite for newness, they've been the saving grace. I truly believe that we have for some time been in the true golden age of filmmaking and television. So they're a lifeblood. I mean, every project that my company, Uncommon Dialogue Films, puts together and develops, that's exactly a main part of our business model, is we're aiming for those check writers. And separated apart from what it used to be, where you were looking for, more often than not, you weren't going to get the money from a studio. You had to cobble together foreign sales, domestic sales, product integration money. I don't know if your audience knows what that is, but some gap funding, some bank funding. You had this house of cards you had to put together for independent filmmaking. Well, now, because of Netflix and those places, you can actually seek out those places for funding for the whole thing. So the business has changed enormously, and it changes almost every day. But thank God those platforms are up and running.
Do you think that they're driving up the price of production with all the competition amongst them?
Well, I mean, I can't tell you if I'm an expert on Netflix, but it appears to me that they have almost an insatiable appetite for high-end content. You take The Crown and things like that. Me as a filmmaker, whereas I used to have to think in terms of frugality, you know, how can I, and I still think in terms of, let's do an appropriate budget for this particular story to charismatically and heroically make it as frugal, at the same time deliver the highest level of filmmaking possible. But now these people are in the market for inexpensive deals. You're no longer blunted in the way, you know, not having to tell a story just because it might be too expensive. Now you can actually hope to get something, because they're looking for flagship productions. The Crown, Narcos. They're looking for things that actually have appropriate budgets, but they're enormous budgets. It used to be it took a studio to do Titanic or to do Spielberg movies. It still does, but now there's more. There's Netflix and Amazon and all these places. There's still a market for inexpensive projects, always, but there's a place for these higher level filmmaking. As an independent filmmaker, to go and do a $36 million movie would be at the upper reaches of the independent film world. What that system could sustain, what that ecosystem could sustain. But now that's not the case. There are check writers for other stuff.
So, you know, with the billions of dollars that the streaming services are pouring into production and acquisition, we're seeing that they're also hiring cinematic grade cinematographers and DPs and directors and using them on television content. And this is producing beautiful TV shows. And you know, I think it's elevating the amount of resistance people have to going to the movie theaters when they can see this stunning content on a big screen at home. Are you sensing that as well? Is that phenomena increasing or decreasing?
Well, it's a process that's been ongoing for a while, and cinematics talent is going to go where the money is on a lot of levels. So to answer your question, even with COVID, I don't think theaters are going to go away, because I think that we'll break out of COVID eventually. And I think people like the experience of going into a theater and seeing things on a huge screen. That said, that's an expensive proposition often for a family to do. So, and with large scale TVs, you can have that cinematic experience at home. That's something that's been happening for a long, long time. But theater owners, I think, still will figure out a way to make that experience great for people. I know as filmmakers, you want to see it on as high a model as you possibly can. I don't really think, I mean, if you really want to see a James Bond film in its greatest application, you still want to see a big screen. Now, you can do that on a television, but you can't duplicate the experience of, say, an IMAX theater or a regular theater like ArcLight. So I hope those things aren't going to go away. They've taken a massive hit from COVID, but they'll be back. I think we'll open up. You're seeing things open up again now.
So things are about to change again, because Samsung is about to introduce a massive wall-sized micro LED TV screen that is put up in tiles. So if you want a TV screen that's 50 inches, you put up 4 tiles, you connect them, and it immediately creates a 50-inch image. If you want one that's 10 feet by 16 feet, you just assemble more tiles, and the TV intelligently enlarges the image accordingly.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to have that in their homes, and that's going to change things a little as well.
I think so too. And again, you're going to have people want to stay home with their family and have their food in their bed as they watch these things. You're also, I think, always going to have an audience that wants to go out as a date, wants to go out to the communal experience of a room full of strangers and see a cinematic experience like that. I hope so. I hope that doesn't stop.
There's no doubt in my mind. People love the communal aspect of it.
Sure.
So you also like to give back to the community by teaching acting to both students and military veterans. Can you tell me about that?
Well, starting out like I did, I went to a lot of acting schools in New York. I really studied all over New York, and I studied a lot of techniques, whether they were British techniques or American techniques, the method, Canadian techniques, which was a merger of the two. So you're always looking for different techniques to deliver the goods. And obviously I did it successfully by mastering first auditioning and then acting, and then I achieved a certain level with screenwriting and some directing on Broadway and off Broadway, and playwriting I had done. I had spent a long amount of time as an advertising writer and a journalist and knew PR. So as I went through this process and I began directing, I remember I was auditioning. It started out about 15 years ago. I was auditioning. We were auditioning 1,000 actors in 5 days, literally an open call. And people would come in and they would do the craziest things. And remember, I had come from, when I first started out, I said, I saw that the key to launching an acting career was audition. I said, if you didn't master auditioning, you weren't going to get a chance to get to the set and really blossom your craft. So I made a science that I developed out of auditioning. And I'd done all these other subsidiary activities, which are not really subsidiary at all. Those actors who thrive and survive in the business are usually ones that have a cross-discipline education in writing, producing, directing, and to some extent teaching. So it was just evolution for me. I got to LA in 1987. I was already a heavyweight writer because I'd written for Time Inc. and Playboy and Interview and every magazine you can think of and every ad agency, creating content for whether it was radio, TV, billboards, whatever, publishers, clearinghouse. I'd done all of that stuff. And when I got to Hollywood, there was a writer's strike, and I said to myself, well, I'm going to teach myself how to be a screenwriter. So I did in the 6 months that the writer's strike occurred. So, and I also could see directors and writers were the guys who really were controlling a lot of things at the time. So it was a matter of evolution. Back to this audition process for 5 days where we had 1,000 actors come in. And these people would come in, John, and they would do the wackiest stuff that was completely counterproductive to actually landing the job. And so I would say, why did you do that? And they'd say, my acting coach told me to, or my acting teacher told me to. So I said, I got to get into some teaching just because this is crazy. So I began, and I taught at studios, I taught privately, I taught at universities, Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia and university. They'd have me in to do a seminar. And for me, it's always auditioning, acting, writing, directing, producing, and distribution. Because any of those things you don't know about, you're going to get slammed, particularly the distribution. So you've got to take the time, and actors, if they're not very aware, would say, why do I need to know about this other stuff? All I want to do is act. Well, the truth is, when you know about great writing, when you know about directing and producing and those other things, chemically, you become a better actor. For example, on the most rudimentary level, if you're in a film that, let's say it's not the highest level cinema art and the script isn't very well realized, well, you've got to come up with good lines. You've got to come up with, you've got to literally improv your way through it. I mean, I just did a movie that won Best Screenplay in the Prague Film Festival, and I improved every word that I said in the movie. So who deserves the screenplay credit? My point is, you need to know all these disciplines. The other thing is, when you learn all of these things that are subsidiary, and they're not subsidiary, they're pivotal to acting, it puts you on a different informational loop. All of a sudden, you're hanging around with other filmmakers who are doing things, and they're viewing you differently. I've literally had directors hire me, television directors, because they were afraid that I wasn't going to hire them as a director. I don't say afraid, but it changed things, the dynamic a lot.
Elevated the respect.
Yeah, you become an employer, a potential employer. So I got into it. I started teaching, and it evolved, and I've done studio stuff. I've done it, we've put curriculums together for foreign countries that might want a film school, or the State Department that might need to cultivate jobs in foreign countries. The seeking of funds around the world has taken me to the London Stock Exchange, to Fiji, to Australia, New Zealand, all the film commissions. I've got a meeting this week with the New Zealand Film Commission, because you learn the economics of filmmaking. And that's as vital as the creative thing. A lot of filmmakers, they come out of New York Film Academy or New York University, and they might know how to make a good film,
So has film and television production returned back to normal in LA, or is it still very cautionary out there?
No, it's far from normal. It's not going to be normal for a long time. They're making efforts. They're doing a lot of different things. I just ran a panel for a Comic-Con called New Age of Hollywood and COVID. And we had lawyers and insurers and directors and actors on there to discuss how, because I was keenly interested as a producer and a developer, what was going on. There are so many ramifications and moving parts. There's the unions, there's the insurance issues. So they're trying to do it in a lot of different ways, and a lot of it is very innovative. You know, it comes down to, for your audience, it comes down to, it's probably going to add 10 to 20% to every budget, just the COVID prevention stuff. And it comes down to, how do you control an environment? Do you quarantine the cast? Yes. It's different if you're doing a reality show or you're doing Top Chef, then you can put everybody in plexiglass containers and you can test them. If you're shooting Saving Private Ryan or something like that, you can't do that. So you still have to plan, do things sectionally, in modules. You've got to control an environment. We look at a lot of different things. Is it better to take over a studio, or is it better to take over an entire street and just test everybody? We've even looked at, do we convert this film to animation or documentary? So if you're I think if you're a savvy person, you're always figuring out, what do you do? I'm very gratified to think I don't have to turn all my films into animated films, because that works for some films. It doesn't work for others.
Yeah, I'm even hearing that a lot of actors are refusing to do love scenes now unless there are some very strict rules in place. So it is affecting things.
Well, anything covered by SAG and the unions is going to be pretty protected. And that brings up the insurance. That's such a vital thing. People, if you're doing a $10 million movie, you've got to get your movie insured. If you're doing $1 million movie, you need insurance. So what insurers are going to cover a movie if they think that everybody in the movie is going to get sued and they're going to be paying out stuff? So there's a lot of stuff that has to be brought to bear. Right now, bonding and insurance, I don't know if you know what bonding is.
Yes.
Yeah, well, those are vital, because what's happening to Walmart and to stores and things that opened up early? The lawyers are lining up to just go after them. So, it's going to be a whole school of law.
Dana White and the UFC, they've even gone so far as to create a hotel just for the fighters. So
sure.
It's part hotel, part quarantine system, and keep everybody under lock and key prior to the event until the event's over. So it's interesting the direction that's going in. Now, let me ask you a personal question. With everything that's going on politically and financially and, on the crime front in Los Angeles and California, do you still feel safe in Los Angeles? Because a lot of my celebrity friends and friends in general are getting out, especially with the new wealth tax that they're hoping to pass in California. I don't know if you've heard about it or not. It's not an income tax, it's a wealth tax. They're actually going to go after your worldwide assets, not just what you have in a California bank account. So how is that affecting you and your colleagues in California?
Well, I'm very blessed. Centrally, what happened with me with COVID was, I'll take me personally and then go to the general thing. Personally, it was a fabulous time for me because, I'll bet very surreal sometimes. I lost a film as an actor. I actually lost two. I didn't worry about that. They'll probably get rescheduled sometime. But being a writer and a producer's consultant and a producer, that kind of work didn't stop for me. And I'm very, very lucky. My company, Uncommon Dialogue Films, and myself got hired to write and produce a great film-based geopolitical thriller in Asia, and what could be more topical. So as well as producers' clients came out of the woodwork, and the teaching continued. I'd been teaching by Skype for years for distant clients, as well as private classes here and stuff. So really the digital teaching just blossomed. So for me, it's been a really rich time. And also I took the time to hone with my team all of our projects themselves, which if I was constantly acting and stuff is more difficult. So we're coming out of COVID with every one of our projects buffed and burnished, and new projects coming online and things like that. Now, it's still been surreal. I'm a certain age and have had my own physical things as I've gone on. Both my wife and I are sort of in the zone, if you will, that can be affected by this thing. So we've been very, very judicious about that. I haven't thought about getting out because I'm doing just fine where I am. That said, Venice, California has a certain lawlessness quality to it now. The homeless thing has skyrocketed. I think there's, in some ways, a complete failure of local government here, out of, in some ways, misguided compassion, but not very visionary policies. There are a lot of people taking the time to get out because you can work remotely. And me personally, I don't feel unsafe. I never have. I'm 6'2" and I'm armed to the teeth. And my martial art was always shooting, and was a reserve policeman in New Mexico, and I've done martial arts and every kind of other thing you can think of for movies. But it's a surreal time. And if you don't have money, I can't imagine what's happening to those people who've lost their entire income, restaurateurs and those people. Now, there's a lot of innovation out there. We have restaurants coming out into the street. The delivery thing has taken over. But those people who respond quickly are doing okay. But it's been a complete realignment of society.
So you mentioned that you were armed really well. Can you tell me, how difficult is it to obtain a concealed carry license in Los Angeles these days?
Look, my martial art, my recreational situation was shooting, and it fit in with playing villains and things like that. And I trained with the LAPD and Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and everything else for that. And so I found it something I like doing. What you're mentioning about a concealed weapons permit, it's almost impossible to get in LA because, and I think illegally so, the LA City Council doesn't exercise its charter, which is to provide concealed weapons permits for those who have a need for it. Well, in fact, the functionality is they've given out none. I think the only people who can get them are jewelry wholesalers, because they get hit all the time. So for the average Angelino and the average Californian, in my opinion, the government has removed their ability to defend themselves outside of their own homes. But let's suppose you're in your car, and the use of lethal force is a very intricate and very responsible topic. You're not allowed to protect property. You can only protect yourself or your family if you have reasonable belief that you're in great bodily harm or imminent death. So, but you're not allowed to have a weapon loaded in a car. You're not allowed to even have a magazine that's loaded. So what are you going to do when somebody hijacks your car? Nothing, because if you even have a weapon, it has to be separate from the ammunition in a locked box and all of that. So basically, your ability to exercise your Second Amendment rights in that circumstance has been taken away. Now, I'm a former reserve patrolman, no longer, but from New Mexico. So technically, I'm supposed to be allowed to carry a weapon in all 50 states. But California has a law that says they don't honor that. So I think it's unconstitutional, the set of circumstances on a lot of levels that they've set up here. And look, they're very dedicated to stripping people of their right to bear arms. And so they constantly pass laws that are nonsensical and have nothing to do with the functionality of weapons and that are actually going to stop crime. That's my opinion. Now, it's a very vivid dialogue and debate that goes on. I think it's very clear that this state doesn't have the wherewithal or the bent to actually honor the Second Amendment constitutionally. So it's a constant struggle with people. We've been through it with magazines. We've been through it with a lot of stuff. Doesn't stop active shooters, doesn't stop crime, doesn't stop looters, doesn't stop rioters. All it does is stop legitimate citizens for having the right to defend themselves. Now, as a consequence, what you really have is you have a whole culture where people are like, oh, great, they want me to be a criminal, I'll be a criminal. So they've armed themselves contrary to the laws, not me. I stay very strict within the confines of the law, and that takes a lot of effort. But a lot of people have said, to hell with it. You know, I'm going to protect my family. And so I know shop owners around here where they attempted to burn down in the recent riots, they're armed to the teeth. And they've made the choice that if they want me to be a criminal, the state, then I'm going to be a criminal.
You know, the White House is about half an hour away from my location now.
Yeah.
And if you go down there and drive around, you will see that virtually all the major buildings of importance and a lot of the commercial and retail buildings, all boarded up. You can walk for blocks in any direction. Everything is boarded up. And if you go to YouTube and you watch some YouTube videos of Manhattan or Fifth Avenue or Santa Monica, just up the road from you,
Sure.
You'll see YouTube videos where people just drive down the streets and it's nothing but boarded up business after boarded up business.
Sure.
So, that's not an environment that people feel are happy to not be able to protect themselves in,
Well, we've been through this before with the Rodney King riots. It's very interesting. The anti-gun people are immediately knocking on my door trying to purchase a shotgun to protect their families as soon as these things happen.
Yeah.
It's a topsy-turvy world, John. I think these lootings and riots sounds hardcore, but the moment they cut down some of them with some firepower from the police, it would end. But the governments don't have the will to exercise that. In fact, they foster it on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
So there's no accountability for lawlessness right now.
Yeah. So you've written an interesting book called Dying for a Living, Sins and Confessions of a Hollywood Villain and Libertine Patriot, Volume 1. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I had a lot of stories after 30 years as an actor and being at a high level with a lot of productions. And so I took the time to court my wife by writing her a tale every week for about a year. And at the end, I had a draft of a book, and I took it to my lawyer because I, named names and people that I worked with, and I wanted to make sure I didn't spend the rest of my life in court. So he said, no, you need a literary agent, and I hadn't had one for a scriptwriter thing. So I called one of the top memoir people in town, and I said, well, I've done 180 films and television, blah, 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 blah. I've written this memoir about the action realm. And he said, well, that sounds like something people would want to read. So I sent it over, and they said, well, we sent it, after a couple of weeks, we sent it to New York to the nonfiction department. And so I worked with them for a while. Eventually, I became disenchanted by the strictures of New York publishing because, so I ended up publishing it. We were always going to do our advertising campaign ourselves. So I Eventually it was published by Boulevard Books in New York, and we did our own advertising campaign, and we launched it, and it's been a great, wonderful device. And I've been all over the country for book signings at Amazon and Barnes and Noble stores, and a lot of radio and podcasts and stuff. I had a 600-page manuscript, so I divided it into two books. One was called Upbringing, which took me kind of through the writing career in New York. And the second one, which is yet to come out, is all show business all the time. There's a lot of Hollywood stuff in the first one because we knew that people were really interested in all of that. So we front loaded a bunch of that, mostly in a large excerpt of book 2. And now I'm polishing volume 2, and it covers all the films. Interestingly enough, while you're doing that, then COVID hit, so you really realize you're doing 2 books. You're doing this document that covers the films and the life of an actor and politics in LA and all of that, but you also realize you're also writing like Dickens about COVID. It's a wonderful exercise, and I really love writing, and I find that a lot of fun. The producing and the film stuff has taken precedent recently because as I articulated, we had film work and stuff like that to get done, and producers' clients and screenwriting assignments. So, but I'll get back to it. I was on the phone to the publisher today.
So before we wrap things up, is there anything you would like to promote?
Well, the book is available on Amazon.com. If someone wants a autographed copy, they can go to patrickkilpatrick.com. I've got a movie coming out called Catalyst, which I'm excited about, where I play a pedophile priest. And the early screenings of that have gone really, really well. Also a movie called Night Walk, which we filmed in Morocco. It's the first Moroccan film to actually come to Hollywood. That'll be out coming up, has just been bought by Lionsgate. And of course, the Uncommon Dialogue film slate of films is in the pipeline. So we'll get down to the specifics of that down the line, perhaps when we talk again. But so Catalyst, Night Walk, and right now in stores and online, patrickkilpatrick.com and Amazon, Barnes and Noble's, Dying for Living: Sins and Confessions of a Hollywood Villain.
By the way, before we go, what did you think of Morocco, filming in Morocco, being in Morocco? What was your impression of the place?
I had been kind of a critic of Islam prior to that, institutionally, not Muslims per se, but institutionally Islam. I was so blown away by Morocco. It was incredible. First of all, I've never met such gracious, such welcoming people. You're talking about an all Moroccan crew. Your fans may want to know I set myself on fire twice for the movie. So I found the people incredibly welcoming, a level of graciousness and hospitality unlike I've ever seen anything in the world. I found an Islam where I actually saw the hope that it gave to people. And they go out of their way to say, we understand that Judaism is the oldest language, Christianity is the second, and Islam is the third. They're very open to tourism. I loved working there. My wife and I traveled all over the country after the filming for nearly a month. And I would recommend anybody to go there. I visited where Jimi Hendrix had a home, and you really see where Jimi Hendrix got a lot of his dressing style and lyrics and all of that from his Moroccan experience. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
You know, I never knew he even went there, but now that you mention it, and I think back on the way he dressed, I see it very clearly.
You see at the moment, we stayed at a little town called Essaouira, which is a fabulous ancient town, really a fort city, and he had a home right outside there. and they point out to the islands and they say, that's where castles made of sand. And you see the islands dripping into the sunset. So, yeah, it was a very enlightening. I think all of us need to travel more and as much as possible, because you learn a lot of the things that we are conveyed in this country can be very limiting in scope.
Well, Patrick, it has been a real pleasure having you on the John Ark Show. You have been extraordinarily generous with your time, and I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, John, and I'll talk to you when Volume 2 comes out.
We look forward to it.
God bless. Cheers. You stay safe.